He sounded like a child, hysterical, desperate, and he always called back after the women were already bleeding, already dying, already gone. He begged for help, sobbed into the phone, but his hands were covered in blood. This is Crime Standstill Deep Cuts. I'm Carrie Drobin, and today I bring you the weird story of the weepy-voiced killer. Killing seemed to me the thing that you were supposed to do that was part of life. Driving a car was part of life. Eating food was part of life. To me, it seemed like killing was part of life until I did it. That was a quote from the serial killer, Paul Michael Stefani, who murdered 3 women between 1980 and 1982 that we know of, in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Killers don't usually call 911 on themselves and beg to be stopped, but that's exactly what Stefani did. So here's what we know about his early life. He was born and raised in Austin, Minnesota, the youngest of 10 children. The former factory worker from a devout Catholic household had a childhood marked by violence and shame. He was described as polite, mild-mannered, but something in him had cracked. Maybe it was being the youngest of 10 children. Just kidding. Maybe it was all those times watching his stepdad hurl his siblings down the stairs when they misbehaved. Did I mention that he was in a devout Catholic household? But he had this crazy stepdad who had his own interpretation of good behavior. It was something dark, and it only grew darker when he lost his janitor job at Malmberg Manufacturing, coincidentally near the site of his first attack 3 years later. After divorcing his wife and abandoning his baby daughter, apparently marriage and children were not for him. I'm always amazed that there is somebody out there for everyone. Okay, so back to the murders. They started on New Year's Day, 1981. A brutal assault in the snow. The victim, 20-year-old college student Karen Potak, who'd mysteriously disappeared from a nightclub, beaten so viciously with a tire iron that part of her brain was exposed to the winter air. No witnesses, no motive, no reason, and then the call. A voice, high-pitched, trembling, weeping. The caller begged police to send a squad car to the Malmberg Manufacturing Company machine shop. That was where they would find a hurt girl. The caller claimed responsibility but didn't give a name, just begged police to find the girl before it was too late. And when dispatch tried to get further details or even ask him who he was, he just hung up. Miraculously, the victim survived, barely. But unfortunately, she had no memory whatsoever of the events. She couldn't even identify her attacker. But this was just the beginning. Over the next year, the calls continued. After every murder, the same shaky, weepy voice. "I'm sorry, I can't stop myself." Each woman left brutally beaten, stabbed, strangled, then discarded like garbage. And each time, he called. Not to taunt, not exactly. To confess, to cry, to beg to be stopped. The media gave him a name. They called him the weepy-voiced killer. Months after the Potak murder, police received another call from the same man claiming to have stabbed another woman with an ice pick. This time it was 18-year-old Kimberly Compton from Pepin, Wisconsin, fresh out of high school, making her way to the big city of St. Paul. She'd taken a bus, and after a long ride decided to lock up her belongings in a locker at the station and head across the street to Mickey's Diner for a quick bite. Inside, Stefani was also eating alone. he approached her, and she gushed about not knowing anyone, not knowing the city. And so naturally, Stefani offered to be her guide. Here's a sidebar here. This is an 18-year-old naive person who's just going on and on about how she knows nothing about this new city, right? It's just a red flag for any predator out there. Her body was later found near an unfinished part of the freeway by 3 teenagers who stumbled on her. Stefani told police that he'd stabbed Kimberly Compton 61 times with an ice pick. He choked her too, dumped her in the bushes like trash. 2 days later, he called again, sobbing. "God damn, will you find me? I stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I'm so upset I can't help myself." But he could help himself, couldn't he? I mean, he could have given the police his name, for fuck's sake. He could have turned himself in. He could have volunteered, "Hey, I'm mental," or "I'm a psycho and I need to be picked up." But he didn't. A few days later, he called again. "I'm sorry for what I did to Compton," he said. "I couldn't help it. I don't know why I had to stab her. I'm so upset. I keep getting drunk every day. I can't believe I did it." Then he called to say that the papers had gotten some of the details wrong. I don't know about you, but if I really wanted to be stopped, I'd walk into the police station, not critique the news reports. But the recordings that he left were clipped. They were so distorted and short that police could never identify the caller. And sometimes they tried to trace the calls to emergency operators. Once they traced it to a bar near a bus station depot, one to a downtown phone booth, but they could never identify the caller. And at first, police couldn't identify Compton. But then, following her autopsy, medical examiners were able to trace the contents of the undigested food in her stomach, food that led back to Mickey's Diner, to witnesses who described her guide. Police also discovered a key in Compton's pocket that matched a locker at the bus depot where she had temporarily stored her belongings. Now they at least had a name for their Jane Doe. And the ice pick, Stefani's weapon of choice, offers critical insight into his psyche. You see, unlike a gun or a large knife, an ice pick is both intimate and inefficient. It requires close contact, repeated strikes, and almost visceral participation in the act of killing. He really had a compulsion or a desire to experience the act physically, maybe even emotionally. To repeatedly stab a person with a narrow, pointed tool is to engage in overkill, right? It reflects a loss of control, a disinhibited eruption of internal conflict. Stefani's attacks weren't clinical, they were frenzied. So the ice pick is kind of an interesting weapon. It's a tool that is not just for harm, but might even be like emotional catharsis, maybe even punishment for the victim or for himself. See, what separates Stefani from the archetypal serial killer is his immediate remorse. I mean, following several of the murders, he would call police sobbing, confessing through tears and self-loathing. "I can't help myself. I don't know why I do it. I'm so sorry." I mean, it reads like genuine torment. I mean, he didn't try to justify his crimes. He appeared to beg for punishment, as if desperate to be caught or stopped, like the remorse was part of his ritual or something. He didn't just need to kill, he needed to feel the weight of it. The act of the murder itself became a perverse sort of feedback loop. Violence followed by confession, then shame, until it built again and he had to kill again. I mean, Stefani was raised in a strict Catholic household, which you have to assume he was deeply religious, at least his family was. Several of his former acquaintances described him as polite, quiet, devout. Maybe that devoutness led to some kind of perversion because he was repressed. I mean, his guilt maybe was not just emotional, maybe it was spiritual over the act of killing. His remorse wasn't merely for the lives that he took, but maybe for the sin that he committed. I mean, it was like a spiritual conflict, right? It may have contributed to the specific, almost obsessive choice of an ice pick. It was a method that was personal and punishing. It might have even be viewed as self-flagellation, right? With the ice pick acting as an instrument of violence and penance, so that he saw death as like a release from his inner torment. I know, getting a little deep there. But I would argue that despite the chaos of Stefani's killings, he did show signs of criminal sophistication. I mean, he moved the bodies. He attempted to hide them. He chose isolated or low-traffic areas. I mean, he couldn't change who he was, but his need to confess, to apologize, to weep, I mean, that was like hardwired in him. And in the end, it really helped seal his fate. The other thing about an ice pick, which is kind of interesting, is that not only is it an unusual murder weapon, I mean, where the hell did he get an ice pick from, you know? You're like, well, maybe not so hard in Minnesota, but with an ice pick, the wounds can be misidentified as something else in autopsies, especially if they're deep and narrow. It might have been a weapon that was used to buy time or mislead investigators. Also suggesting that he needed to be physically close to his victims, right? Because it requires multiple stabs, multiple thrusts. Not like a gun or a long blade that can be used at a distance, right? And it also suggests rage, right? Some kind of like compulsion that might have been linked to feelings of guilt or shame or, I mean, some killers, they'll choose weapons based on their past trauma or their fantasies or their rituals. I mean, it could be tied to that, to punishment or a need to degrade, right? But because he had to carry it, or at the very least acquire it, I mean, that implies premeditation. But it's crude, it's inefficient. And it also suggests that he might have been a little bit chaotic in his thinking, right? As if the act itself was more emotional than calculated. It kind of reflects, or I guess mirrors, the killer's dual nature, right? He's ordinary, sort of ordinary on the surface, but monstrous underneath. Each new call that he made came with fresh blood, a new victim, and still no name. Just that pitiful, weepy voice that begged for forgiveness but kept coming back for more. It was like he wanted the killings known. He wanted the recognition, but he needed the control. So even when Minneapolis police thought that they had a suspect, a guy named Alan Lopez, who confessed during a family domestic violence standoff, they realized that they had the wrong voice, the wrong man. I mean, nobody could identify them. I mean, it's really crazy that other people would take credit for this, right? But then came 40-year-old Barbara Simmons, a nurse, friendly, full of life. She met a man at a bar, danced with him, told a waitress, "I hope he's a nice guy. He's giving me a ride home." I mean, why? Why do people say stuff like this? Of course she never made it. One of the bartenders noticed something off, noticed that the man had been making strange faces, like he was sizing people up. Well, why not say something about it? Why just notice the stuff after the fact? That's what I don't get. There are all these little breadcrumbs along the way, and nobody does anything. Nobody says anything, even though it's, causing red flags. So Barbara's body was found along the Mississippi River, beaten and stabbed, left near the edge of a tree line. Drag marks through the grass showed how far that he'd pulled her before trying to toss her into the water. But he failed because small trees caught her, sparing her body from being swept away. But this time, Stefani left something else behind. He left witnesses and a new call. This is what he said. Please don't talk. Just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one over in St. Paul. I don't know what's the matter with me. I'm sick. I'm going to kill myself, I think. I mean, can you imagine getting that call? Don't talk, just listen. And then he confesses to Kimberly Compton's murder, in addition to the one he just did. So this time, detectives worked backwards from the bar, right? They showed photo lineups to the staff, and one by one, the faces slid across the counter until one face stopped a waitress cold. That's him, she said. Finally, police had a breakthrough. Witnesses at the bar gave them a name, Paul Stefani. His ex-wife, right? Remember his ex-wife? His sister. They all recognized the weepy voice on the 911 tapes. And it turns out the quiet, church-going former janitor with no serious criminal record had a chilling pattern. Stefani had previously assaulted a woman wearing a red robe. Every known female victim that Stefani attacked or killed was wearing red. Kimberly Compton, in red. Barbara Simmons, red pants. And he even referenced, in this call, if she's wearing red, I did it. So, the color red, coincidentally also my favorite color, symbolically evokes passion, danger, shame, and blood. In religious contexts, is the color of temptation and sin. So to Stefani, red may have been a trigger, consciously or not, but it perhaps reminded him of lust or rejection, or female power or allure. I mean, the violence that followed was less about the woman herself and more about what she represented. But Stefani wasn't done. So despite police surveillance, he struck again. This time picking up a 19-year-old Denise Williams, a sex worker in Minneapolis. Williams agreed to go with Stefani, but during the drive she became uneasy as he steered the car into a dark, unfamiliar suburban area instead of returning to the city. Her apprehension grew when he turned onto a secluded dead-end road, but what Stefani didn't know was that there were houses on this seemingly deserted road. Even though the houses were dark, they were sort of edged back off the road. So once he's there in this secluded dead-end road, Stefani attacks Williams. He stabs her 15 times with a screwdriver. Williams fought back fiercely, managing to break a glass bottle over Stefani's head. So she had a beer bottle by her feet, and she uses it to smash it over Stefani's head and also to slash his face. Her screams for help attracted the attention of a nearby resident who confronted Stefani. So this guy comes flying out of this, dark house. This whole neighborhood is like little trolls, like the houses look like little trolls. And all of a sudden, her screams attract the attention of this resident who comes flying out. And so this intervention forces Stefani to flee the scene, and, he leaves Williams behind. So Williams is quickly assisted by the residents, who thankfully calls for an ambulance, ensuring that she's receiving prompt medical attention. And meanwhile, Stefani, right, he's bleeding profusely out of his head and his face. And he's he needs medical help. So he calls 911 for him. But when he contacts emergency services, the authorities recognize his voice, right? They recognize it from previous anonymous, remorseful calls that he had made after other attacks. They recognize him as the weepy-voiced killer. So his own MO, if you want to call it that, does him in. And Denise's bravery and her memory break the case wide open. So he's arrested that night. Denise has picked him out of a photo lineup. And just like that, his killing spree is over. Now, he's only convicted of Barbara Simmons' murder and Denise's attempted murder, because those are the only two that they actually have evidence for. I mean, the rest of them, he tells them he's done it, but they don't have any evidence. and he gets 58 years behind bars. But there's one thing that's still missing, and that's the answer. Why? So 12 years into his sentence, he's diagnosed with terminal cancer, right? I mean, that's just... there's someone like him, you kind of want him to be there forever, right? And serve out his whole sentence for the 58 years so he can suffer. But no, he gets terminal skin cancer. So he makes a final confession, and he states, this is pretty chilling, okay? He states, "Mother always told me if something hurts, you go to God." Wow. So in that confession, he admits to attacking Karen Potok, killing Kimberly Compton, and shockingly, to drowning a woman that no one had connected him to, named Kathleen Greening. She was a school teacher found dead in her own bathtub without a follow-up call, right? This was completely out of pattern, which suggests that Stefani was experimenting with control. Perhaps he was actually evolving with her. So why did he confess? Was it guilt, or a final bid for forgiveness, or a compulsive need to narrate the damage before the curtain fell? Maybe all three. But Stefani didn't confess like Bundy. He didn't gloat. There were no tales of manipulation or power. His confessions were more like purging, right? Each murder is an act that he seemed to regret while he was committing it. The ice pick, the screwdriver, the bathtub, they were his tools of power. They were release valves. And the calls? Some would argue that the calls were like trophies, but I don't know. I think they were breakdowns, right? It was part of his ritual. I'm sorry, I can't stop myself. Stefani died on June 12, 1998. He took no lives with him in the end, just memories of violence and a voice soaked in regret. And then a final haunting truth that even monsters can cry. You've been listening to Crime Stands Still Deep Cuts with Carrie Drobin. Until next time, don't talk, just listen.